Greetings, ladies and metal gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read it for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Cost of 5 Minutes, written by Silver20006. Healer! Men rushed into the tent again, urgently shouting, followed by the stretcher bearers. Ufrantis was used to this already. These few years of war had hardened her to these situations, and she replied with a loud but calm voice over the consistent screams and shouts in the packed field hospital. Here, put him down here. The group of human warriors and camp followers helped the stretcher bearers to slowly put the patient on the makeshift operating table, still bloody from the last patient. It was a young civilian knight, barely over his 20s. His helmet was already removed, and from the state of his armor and face, she knew things were terrible. The previously gold-ornated steel had now been battered to scrap metal. His right pauldron gone, exposing a few strands of fabric that were once his arming doublet, and the shoulder underneath was bloody mess. His face was an unhealthy pale and covered in terrific wounds. Lips darkened, blood was seeping out from his nose and mouth with every wake breath. Specific condition? She asked as she checked his pulse, half knowing the answer already. Through a panicked voice, and his retinue answered, Quicksilver poisoning. The 9th one she'd seen today. Please, do what you can to save our lord, the squire pleaded. A sudden surge of rage almost overcame Ufrantis. Her hands clenched into fists, attempting her best to contain it. I will. Now, get out, all of you. You'll only get in the way. But out now. I don't have time for you, nor does your master. With reluctance, the group of retinue left. Ufrantis began to shout out orders to her assistants. Everyone was quick-paced. There was no time for delicacy now. They had to cut the leather armor strips first to treat the physical wound. And by the looks of the battered armor and blood leaking from the armor joints, it must be bad. At the same time, Ufrantis prepared the proper healing spells and potions for detoxification. With quicksilver poisoning, every second counts. When they finally cut loose his armor and removed his caress, even Ufrantis gasped. His body was covered in every wound possible: cuts, tears, bruises, dislocations, broken bones and burns. Not to mention heat stroke from continuous fighting in the suit of metal. Ufrantis could not imagine what he had been through, whatever hell this knight had endured, and survived. She immediately began chanting the required spells to stop the bleeding, while her assistants tried to clean the wound to assist with the healing and feed the knight water and the antitoxin potion. But nothing was working. The young knight's wounds were too severe. The quicksilver had likely done too much damage to his body for it to heal, even with the best Carithian healing magic and potions. His pulse and breath grew weaker with every moment that passed. No, you stay with me, you human bastard, Ufrantis muttered under her breath. I'm not letting you die here, not after whatever hell you've come through. Ufrantis stood closer, putting her hands closer to his body, pouring more mana and psychic focus onto her chants, hoping that the healing magic would drag this young human knight back from the gates of death. Suddenly, the young knight took Ufrantis by surprise and grabbed her arm with the strength that a dying human should not have. He dragged Ufrantis closer to him and spoke. Where are the Carithians? Did the civilians, did they retreat successfully? He struggled with every word, wheezing breath between his weak speech. Yes, they did. Ufrantis put her other hand on his and answered. You should rest now. You have suffered terrible wounds. Good. The edge of his mouth jerked slightly upwards as he relaxed his head back, his brows no longer twitching in pain. The young knight's voice slowly faded away with a relieved and satisfied tone. And then his breath ceased. The grip on Ufrantis' forearm loosened, and the human's hand slowly slipped away, and his arm dropped down the edge of the makeshift operating table. Ufrantis sat by the bank of a small river around the camp. Her shift had ended, and she was relieved by another healer primer. She was tired, but she could not bring herself to rest. She looked down and slowly rubbed her right forearm. Though her fingers' marks had long since faded, the gripping sensation of the young human knight still lingered. great healer Ofrantis. It was human surgeon Igonita. She was exhausted as well, with the same fatigue and bloodied face as Ofrantis had seen many times. Mind if I sit with you? Ofrantis shook her head and turned back towards the river again. Igonita sat down slowly with that grunt. She rubbed her hands together, trying to formulate something to say, and eventually she let out a deep breath and spoke. I've heard from Sir Bayard. You've done your best. Do not feel bad about it. Ofrantis knew the surgeon was merely trying to comfort her, and she was grateful about it. But her odd sense of anger began to creep in again, and she couldn't help herself but ask, Why do you let them use it? I beg your pardon. The human surgeon's head turned, her expression clearly confused. The quicksilver, why do you let them use it? Ofrantis repeated again, this time with a bit more agitation. No one lets them use it, the surgeon answered, with an awkward chuckle. They are knights. They let themselves use whatever they want. But did you not warn them about it, that it would kill them? Oh, I did. We all did, in fact. Every scholar did, but they do not care. Though this explanation did not quell Ofrantis' anger, it did shock her. Listen, Grand Healer. You might think of us as a war-mongering lunatics that have no regard for ourselves or our people. The human surgeon's tone began to become more serious, and she turned her whole body towards Ofrantis, looking her directly in the eyes. We have no magic, like your kind. The dexterity of the elves, the strength of the giants, nor the sorcery of the Cobrans. We are human, and what we are is what we have, and whatever we can utilize, we will do so. This is how we survive. This is how we win wars. These knights came to fight for your people because they believe it is righteous and just, and they will do whatever it takes to win, as it is the only way. Whatever it takes, no matter the cost. 5 hours ago, River Keflar. Sir Bayard, Maestro Spar has ordered a general retreat. The left have disintegrated, and the Tercio can't halt them. What of the refugees? The Corinthians have not finished the crossing yet, Sir Bayard of Denmark asked, meanwhile casually dispatching a Copran cataphract with his poleaxe. The Maestro said that we can't risk the entire Tercio. Whoever is left, only the saints can save them now. The messenger answered in haste, then gave a quick salute and rode off, racing to relay that order. Damn, Bayard muttered under his breath. Tercia de la Meriglia de Axio had been engaged in battle for more than 5 hours non-stop, just to keep the Keflar bridgehead open for the Corinthians refugees to retreat. Now that they were so close to salvation, their savior would abandon them for their fates. This cannot do. I will not bear the shame to abandon the innocent to these savages. Master Gallio, tell me how much time I have left for the runes. The knight turned to his mage retinue. Sir, I must warn you that if... But before the mage could finish his protest, the young knight interrupted him. Just tell me how much time. The mage retinue reached out his hand and placed it on Sir Bayard's armor, momentarily closing his eyes in concentrate. My liege, you have approximately 1 hour left with the amount of quicksilver, but I must insist, sir, that prolonged usage of will kill me. I am aware of that, Master Gallio. The runic circuit activated. The runes etched in the old Savinian and linear circuit glowed. Sir Bayard could feel power pulsing through him, and mana flowed throughout his armor, accompanied with a metallic sweetness in his mouth. Master Gallio, tell the batteries under no circumstances they should stop firing and retreat unless the final line of the Spadone Veterano has failed, and inform the Maestro I will buy time for the refugees. His retinue bowed and hurried to their orders. There was no farewell words. They need none of such things. Bayard lowered his visor and readied his poleaxe. Here we go then. With a kick that shook the ground, he propelled himself into a great leap, crossing 100 paces within seconds and smashing into a densely packed Copranite formation. The impact killed 12 men outright. The rest blew away like dolls. Sir Bayard swung his poleaxe with augmented strength, and Hammerhead carved an armor and turned Copran flesh into tenderized meat and mashed paste. Then something hit. Immense heat was what Bayard felt first, followed by the concussive blow. Something with the strength of a bull impacted his and knocked his wind out of him. The taste of metallic sweetness in his mouth felt stronger, now with the addition of blood. He must keep moving. He must buy time for the retreat. 5 more minutes. Just 5 more minutes will do. His legs were still moving, pushing him forward. The armor must have held, and the runes were still functional, feeding both the armor and him power. Ignoring the clang of arrows, uselessly glancing off his armor, Bayard concentrated through his one-arrow visor, trying to locate the source of the attack. He caught a glimpse of a red light with the corner of his vision slit. He instinctively blocked it with his poleaxe. Years of training kicked in as muscle memory took over. The poleaxe exploded in splinters of wood and steel shards. There was a group of mages 200 paces away, already charting for the next attack spell. Then the ground around their position erupted, throwing up dirt and pink mist. Body parts flaked around as civilian hunter-killer gun batteries precisely executed their anti-sorcerer tactics. But the salvo did not kill them all. There's one left. With a roar, Bayard threw the broken shaft in his hand. The air boomed as it accelerated towards his target. The wooden pole impacted the shield bearers guarding the mage and smashed right through them, sent them flying, then hit the chanting mage with so much force his body was ripped in two. There was no pause between his movements. Sir Bayard was already moving. He drew his blade and leapt forward again, carving his way through iron and sinew. Just 5 more minutes. Elite cataphracts and Yenazar guards came for him, axe blades and mace flashing on armor-piercing sorcery, specifically to counter a fully armored human knight. Good! He had caught the attention of the enemy now. Steel clashed and blows were exchanged. Rings and metal flakes flew in all directions as enchanted chainmail and lamella were blasted through the sheer brute force. Sir Bayard gripped his long sword on the blade, using its crossguard and pommel as a temporary hammer, as cuts were of little effect. Just 5 more minutes. These creatures were but crude imitations of him, heavily armored head to toe, and went through vigorous training for sure. But they were no knights. Sir Bayard was born into war. His sole purpose was war. To them, this was an occupation. To him, this was what he was made for. It was a part of his nature, as if breathing air. But he was but one, and they were many. And the poison began to drag him down. Bayard forgot when he lost the sense of smell and taste, nor the sensation of pain. His hands were numb, and he struggled to breathe and had to consistently fight against the urge to remove his helm. Just 5 more minutes. The golem towered over him, its strength that could shatter fortress walls. Its giant, rocky digits curled around into a fist and swung. He caught Sir Bayard in the right shoulder as he attempted to dodge the blow. It sent him flying, whirled into the air, and crushed into the ground. There was no pain, but a sense of tiredness dragged Bayard down as if something dropped a mountain over him. His body was so heavy. His armor was so heavy. His eyelids were so heavy. His mind was murky, and he could not even comprehend the ringing in his ears anymore. Where am I? I am tired. Must rest. No! The slam of the golem's feet snapped him awake. I must fight! Bayard could not sense his right arm anymore, broken, cut away, and his vision was a mix of blurred images. But it does not matter. Now he must stand and fight. He clenched his teeth and attempted to push his body up. The runic circuit no longer glowed as brightly, and struggled to push the battered armor and broken knight up. Move, Bayard! You must move! If you will not fight, who will? If you do not stand, who will stand? You are an exemplar! You are the bastion! You must fight for these who can't! You are a knight! He roared and lifted himself up, staggering in the process. His blade was no longer with him, so he drew the dagger. Just 5 more minutes. The world was grey and silent. Bayard laid beside the golem's head, his dagger embedded deep in its face. He could no longer move. Truly, this time. He felt weightless, yet heavy, as if his body was no longer belonged to himself. The heat that burned him slowly died down, and it started to get colder. and colder. And although the sensation of pain slowly slipped back, oddly, not to the degree that was unbearable. A small breeze blew across his face. He did not know when his visor was smashed away, or perhaps he just opened it himself. He did not remember, actually. He could not remember many things. But one question did linger in his mind. Did the refugees cross the river? He hoped that they did. He hoped that Maestro of the Tercio did listen to his retinues. He hoped that he had been enough. He hoped he did buy them enough time. Just 5 more minutes. Darkness slowly crept up from the corners of his eyes. Bayard tried to fight it, but his mind had begun to drift as well. He could not focus anymore. Then darkness, coldness, and silence. End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons, Trackzoon WRE, Quantum Wednesday, Ambrose Cattell, Lord Ashrakal, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.